I would like to call this February 19th, 2026, North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission meeting to order. This meeting is being live streamed for the public to attend and recorded as a public record. The recording of this meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.gov. We'd first like to call on Commissioner Ray Clifton to give us the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise if you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, for the invocation, Commissioner Mike Alford.
Let us pause for a moment of reflection. As we gather for this February meeting of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, we are mindful of the season around us. Winter is loosening its hold, and across our mountains, Piedmont, and coastal plain, the natural world is awakening. It is a fitting time to recommit ourselves to the work of conservation. We give thanks for the wildlife officers, staff, and biologists who carry out this mission every day in the field, in the lab, and in the communities they serve. Their expertise and dedication are the foundation upon which everything we do is built. We are grateful for the citizens and sportsmen and women of North Carolina who love these lands and waters and ask us to be good stewards of them. That trust is not something we hold lightly. As we take up the business before us today, may we be guided by sound science, good judgment, and a genuine commitment to leaving North Carolina's wildlife resources better than we found them. In His name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Very nice, Commissioner. Now I'd like to call on Margot Minkler for the roll call of commissioners present.
Good morning. I'm going to do a roll call for commissioners present for our February 19th, 2026 commission meeting. Chairman Mark Craig. Vice Chairman Landon Zimmer.
Here.
David Boyle. John Coley.
Here.
Wes Seegers. Tommy Pomble.
Here.
Tom Berry. Brad Stanback.
Here.
Jim Ruffin.
Here.
Ray Clifton.
Here.
Steve Wyndham.
Here.
Bonnie Crump.
Here.
John Stone.
Here.
Hayden Rogers.
Here.
John Alexander.
Here.
Tom Hayslip.
Here.
J.C. Cole.
Yeah.
Mike Alford.
Here.
Joe Budd.
Here.
Reed Smith.
Here.
And Justin Boyd.
Here.
Mr. Vice Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Proceeding with the mandatory ethics inquiry, North Carolina General Statute, Section 138A-15 mandates that the commission chair shall remind all commissioners of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict under this chapter. And that the chair also requires as to whether there is any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the commission at this time. It is the duty of each commissioner who is aware of such personal conflict of interest or of an appearance of a conflict to notify the chair of the same. Are there any conflicts? Seeing none, would like to proceed with the minutes, which were distributed to each of you in your agenda package. Are there any corrections? Seeing none, would like to hear a motion to approve.
So moved.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now I'm going to ask also for a motion on exhibits A and B. We now call on Jason Connell, Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'll draw everyone's attention to Exhibit C, our financial status report for our general and capital improvement funds. And I'll mention that all data being presented on these next few slides is as of December 31st. Excuse me. In our general fund category, total revenues to date were $82,874,281.16. Our total expenditures in the same were $83,478,301.29, leaving us with an overall fund balance as of December 31st of $20,509,121.88. Looking at our capital improvement fund, total revenues for the same time period year to date, $10,117,664.27. Total expenditures in the same, $7,587,208.03, leaving us with an overall fund balance of $7,005,188.80. Moving on to the endowment fund, and again, this is as of December 31. Total fund balance at that point in time is now $245,923,658.47. Asset allocation holding steady at 86% equities, 14% short term. Looking at the expendable income available life to date, now exceeds $100 million. Of that, we've got about 51 million allocated for the next 3 years. The biggest project on deck there is the Setzer Hatchery renovation, which is picking up steam now that we've wrapped up on Armstrong. That's going to leave us with about 48.5 million expendable income to be utilized over the next few years. When we reconvene at the next Finance Audit and Compliance Committee meeting, I'll have some examples of how we've put those expendable income earnings to use in the current year. I don't usually like to mix and match data. Everything you've seen on the 3 previous slides has been as of December 31. But we did just last week get the numbers for the latest update on the endowment fund. And I know many of y'all have been eagerly awaiting confirmation of that $20 million transfer. That was completed. We now, as of January 31st, have exceeded $250 million in the endowment fund for the first time ever. It's right at 254 million. And that allocation is now about 77% equities, 23% short-term or cash on hand. Are there any questions? And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
All right, going to go on to committee meeting reports. I'd like to start with the Fisheries Committee. John Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The committee met February 18th, 2026 at 9 a.m. Potential in the 2027, 2028 annual revenue cycle year. Staff presented an update on renovation project, etc. State Fish Hatchery, discuss how the agency is providing anglers with information about temporary changes to the public method trout stock. Staff reviewed angling trends right past along the running river. Results from the Lake Norman Bodie Bass exploration study were presented, showing that the fishery was very popular among anglers, with an annual mortality rate of nearly 45%. Finally, staff introduced the concept of addressing automation was issued by North Carolina Department of Marine Fisheries to reduce confusion among anglers. After a robust discussion, the committee determined the concept needed more evaluation. There's no further business needed to do.
Everyone. I'd like to go to the Big Game Committee. Monty Crone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Big Game Committee met yesterday, February 18th. Staff presented updates on a variety of big game topics related to deer and bear. First were updates on the 25-26 season CWD testing results, CWD management strategy. To date, there are 27 new CWD positive. 4 of those came from 2 new counties, Sampson and Edgecombe. North Carolina is now up to 61 confirmed positive cases, CWD, 7 different counties. Several potential rule ideas related to big game management presented, along with an update of the preliminary 2026-27 deer and bear harvest for record years. Finally, staff shared the timeline for updates and revisions to the bear management plan, which will be presented later this year and the first of next year. Having no further business, committee adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move to Small Game Committee. Jim Ruffin.
Mr. Vice Chairman. Small Game Committee met yesterday, February the 18th. Staff presented several potential rule ideas for the upcoming regulation cycle related to small game and fur bear species. Next, staff presented several topics for consideration for the Small Game Committee to address for the 26-27 committee cycle. Topics included managing early successional habitat, private lands, and the challenges landowners face, predation management, and efforts to develop better recommendations for landowners. Also, we discussed fur bear management, including reviewing the results of our trapper survey and review of trapping regulations. Having no further business, meeting was adjourned.
Thank you. Would like to now move to Land Acquisition and Property Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Land Acquisition and Property Committee met at 1:30 on February 18th. Committee began by reviewing the 2027-2028 land and water access rule proposals. Committee recommended removing one regulation from the regulation package, specifically the proposal requiring all tree stands, commercially produced blinds, and trail cameras placed on game lands without a special use permit to be personally identified through a displayed tag that includes the name and address of the owner or their WRC ID. The committee also reviewed and approved 8 Phase 1 land acquisition proposals, 2 Phase 2 land acquisition proposals, and 1 easement request at Juniper Creek Game Land. The easement request was amended by the committee to grant an express easement for ingress and egress with a restriction to only support one single-family dwelling. The committee adjourned at 2:20 p.m. That concludes the report.
Thank you. The committee of the whole, as you all know, Chairman Craig is able to attend this meeting. He's supporting his wife, who is being recognized by Safari Club International for her achievements. He'll be back at the next meeting. The committee of the whole met yesterday afternoon and began a discussion on several proposed changes to wildlife management rules, the 2027-2028 rulemaking cycle. The committee then reviewed proposed rulemaking related to water safety, mandatory fish harvest reporting requirements, striped bass, bluefish, and sheepshead. Initial determinations for the periodic rules review were also shared. The rulemaking and periodic rules review items will be presented as exhibits later in this meeting. An overview of the OWL webcam project was also presented. The meeting concluded with discussion of plans for the upcoming October commission meeting, and there being no further business, the committee adjourned. As that concludes our committee meeting reports, I would like to now call on Corey Oakley, Inland Fisheries Division Chief, to introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So today I'm glad to introduce two guys that have worked for the Wildlife Commission for a long time. They're old like me, and that's okay. The first one is Kevin Dockendorf. Kevin is our Coastal Fisheries Research Coordinator, has spent a tremendous amount of time on black bass management in the coastal plain. And the second is Ken Hodges, who's the District 7 fisheries biologist. If you look up what a district biologist, fisheries biologist should be, his picture will be there. He is one of the best that I think our commission has ever had. So they're going to talk about black bass management in the state of North Carolina.
Good morning. Thank you, Corey. I appreciate the introduction. Just want to recognize Commissioner Alford's convocation. That was really, really important on the stewardship of we do, and just recognizes everyone is just great. Thanks again for the opportunity to talk about black bass management in North Carolina. We have 4 native black bass species here in North Carolina. Largemouth bass and smallmouth bass on the top are some of our popular ones. True spotted bass is found in the mountain region, and the Bartram's bass, recently identified, is found in the Savannah River Basin. Today, we're going to talk about mostly the largemouth bass and smallmouth bass fisheries. These are our most popular bass fisheries in North Carolina, and we have opportunities to be out there sampling these fish with various folks from all division and offices, and everyone that assists with that is greatly appreciated. First, with largemouth bass, these are a statewide species. They are considered general habitat generalists, excuse me. And they're found from mountain reservoirs to Piedmont reservoirs, coastal rivers, any ponds in between. They are quite popular to our anglers and as an apex predator in the ecosystems that they're in. Where we manage smallmouth bass is often in the mountain regions, and you heard a talk from David Goodfried about a couple of those populations, primarily found in high elevation reservoirs and the foothills, and there are a few near the Virginia border on the Chowan River. How we survey and monitor the black bass is primarily through electrofishing to assess those bass populations. We monitor them for length, weight, sex, the growth of those fish, their age, and that helps us come into our regulation of these black bass species, where we can set length or recommend length and creel limits to be changed. In some instances, we can put special regulations on them with trophy versus harvest-orientated fisheries. Our general rule is that most populations are managed with a 5-fish daily creel limit, and with the exemption that 2 could be harvested that are less than 14 inches. Habitat's a big thing for black bass. As I said, they're habitat generalists, but they still could use a little bit of help in our reservoirs in some locations. So we do place artificial habitats out to help concentrate fish, provide forage areas, and those types of things that provides opportunities for anglers. As far as that with some artificial habitats. And we also have natural habitats where we drop trees along shorelines and have a robust aquatic plant nursery to bring in some aquatic plants in areas where those aquatic plants may not be doing as well as we would like to see naturally. Stocking is a big tool in the fisheries management toolbox. We utilize the opportunities to supplement missing year classes or perhaps establish new populations. But we also use them to investigate questions that we may have about these populations or how we can improve opportunities for anglers. Another big part of what we do with that stocking is do look at research within that. So it helps support management decisions. We do conduct research internally, as well as partnering with our universities on specific objectives that may take a little bit more time than we can accommodate within our district work plans or work plans. As an example of research that we're conducting internally is to research the genetic makeup of these NC black bass species. This is necessary to inform management decisions, as there is opportunity for species identification and recognition of hybridization in these Micropterus species that we are managing. For that species identification and hybridization, we have two options to evaluate through genetics. And one of those options is through those species identifications. And another opportunity is to look at largemouth bass, which prior to when we started in 2018, there was much interest in what was the difference of largemouth bass alleles versus Florida bass alleles, which is a really interesting component for both fisheries biologists and anglers as to what is the best option out there for us. We've sampled 10,000 tissue samples over 101 water bodies and 144 black bass populations assessed, with 74 populations looking at that largemouth bass versus Florida bass, and 70 populations looking at species identification, as well as how hybridization may be occurring in some of these overlapping populations. To look at the statewide largemouth bass alleles and Florida bass alleles, we actually do have some Florida bass alleles within our populations of largemouth bass. And this is quite interesting that from Murphy to Manio, where we have in the mountain region, somewhat of an equal proportion of Florida bass and largemouth bass alleles. But as we move to the Piedmont, there's a little bit more Florida bass alleles. And then as we move to the coastal region, we have dominant Florida bass alleles at 80% compared to about 20% alleles in the largemouth bass. And why does this matter to us? We want to know what the baseline of those alleles are, because we do have a pretty interesting project that is being conducted in the Piedmont region, looking at a F1 hybrid, which is a 50-50 cross of pure largemouth bass and pure Florida bass. And this opportunity, can we look at the trophy potential for these species within our reservoirs? And to conduct the research, we look at ways to maintain things that are constant, such as stocking rate, but the opportunity to look at lakes with varying productivity levels. 3 lakes have been chosen: Lake Norman with a relatively low productivity level, Lake Gaston with a moderate, and Lake Jordan with a high productivity level, to see if we can see any differences in the performance of the F1 bass program. We'll conduct evaluations through electrofishing and visiting bass tournaments to collect fin clips. We'll assess growth, condition, and abundance there. And how we evaluate it continues with the stockings that have been done with 1.2 million F1 bass stock so far. Over 1,000 fin clips have been collected so far to evaluate this. And there is some F1 bass being found in these surveys. And with that, I'll wrap up my section and hand it over to Ken.
Good morning. Unfortunately, I have to start my portion of the presentation discussing some of the challenges we face to managing black bass in North Carolina. And the biggest challenge our bass populations have ever faced is the introduction of Alabama bass. Alabama bass are not native to North Carolina. They've been brought here and spread across the state illegally by anglers. These are not the same species as the native spotted bass that Kevin told you about. They're very closely related and they're nearly identical in appearance to the point that most anglers don't realize they're two different species. So anglers call all of these fish spotted bass, but in reality, with only a few exception of a very few watersheds, anytime in North Carolina an angler talks about catching spotted bass, they're really catching Alabama bass. Now, this isn't just a matter of semantics. These are two very different fish with very different impacts. Spotted bass are very benign and they get along with other bass species where they coexist. Whereas when Alabama bass are introduced, they completely wreak havoc on our fisheries. Whenever Alabama bass are mixed in with largemouth bass, they end up out-competing them head to head and over time just displacing them numerically in the population. So your numbers of largemouth bass decrease while your numbers of Alabama bass increase. When they get around smallmouth or spotted bass, they aggressively interbreed to the point that after enough generations, your original genes of your smallmouth and spotted bass are completely eliminated and all you have left are Alabama bass. And it's important to stress, this is not a one-to-one trade-off, trading an Alabama bass for a largemouth or smallmouth. While Alabama bass do have some positive qualities, they fight really hard for their size. They're very aggressive and bite better, which is why anglers have brought them here in the first place. In general, they're much smaller and across the board, they're much less desired by anglers than our native bass species. To give an example of what happens when Alabama bass interact with largemouth bass, this is a case study from Lake Gaston. Alabama bass have only been here since about 2016. The white line on top shows the trend of largemouth bass numbers over the last 10 years. The yellow line on the bottom is Alabama bass. And if you follow the way those lines converge, you can see that in less than 10 years, Alabama bass have already become more abundant than largemouth bass. And this is a very classic graph. You see this same pattern occur in almost every lake where Alabama bass are introduced. It's even more pronounced now in the lakes in the western half of the state because Alabama bass have been there even longer. To that point, here's a map of the state showing all of the 32 water bodies where Alabama bass are currently documented. You can see that most of those are clustered in the western half of the state, but they are gradually spreading eastward. In addition to water bodies where Alabama bass are already found, we also have a couple of important ones to note where we have new important fisheries that are being threatened. In 2025, Alabama bass discovered in Lake McIntosh in Alamance County. Lake McIntosh impounds a creek that drains eventually into Jordan Lake, which is one of our best largemouth bass fisheries. So those fish now have a pathway to make it into Jordan Lake. Similarly, they are also now in the Roanoke River where they migrated downstream after being stocked into Carr Lake and Lake Gaston. And the Roanoke River drains into the Albemarle Sound, which is just off the screen, which is fed by numerous rivers that feed it that have some of the best bass populations in the state. So we're very concerned as well about these new possibilities for spread. So when Alabama bass interact with smallmouth bass, this is a demonstration of how they impact the genetics of those populations. Lake James is one of our best smallmouth bass lakes in the mountains, and Alabama bass are now present there. So we began doing genetic analysis of Lake James smallmouth bass in 2018 using some of the same genetics techniques Kevin described earlier. In our first survey in 2018, over 61% of the fish that looked like smallmouth bass were actually genetically pure smallmouth bass. But in the subsequent 5 to 6 years, that percentage has already dropped down to 13 or 14. And ultimately, we expect it to reach 0 and the smallmouth bass will be gone. We're seeing this same pattern in all the lakes in the mountains that have smallmouth and Alabama bass. And we realistically expect most of those populations to be lost, the smallmouth bass populations to be lost within the next 20 to 30 years. We also have a lot of great smallmouth bass populations in the rivers of the western half of the state. This is the map Kevin showed of the smallmouth bass occurrences in the western part of the state. Unfortunately, the systems with the red circles are the only systems where we do not have Alabama bass. Everywhere else, Alabama bass are already in these systems and have the potential to branch out and impact almost all of our riverine smallmouth fisheries. At the moment, we're not seeing the same level of genetic impacts in those rivers that we are in the lakes, but they've not been in the rivers nearly as long. Most of these introductions are made directly into the lakes, and then they spread from the lakes throughout the river system over time. So we'll be monitoring these populations, again, using the same genetic techniques to determine how the smallmouth populations are holding up in the presence of Alabama bass. So what are we doing about this? Really, our only tool is to educate the public and get them on our side to help combat this problem. The first part of the message is encouraging people do not stock Alabama bass into new waters where they're not found. For waters where they are already present, we're encouraging them to keep as many Alabama bass as possible to lessen their impact on the native bass species. We know we can't get rid of them, but the lower we can keep their numbers, the more of a chance our native bass species have. To accomplish that, we've removed the size and creel limits on Alabama bass so people can keep all they want. So to help get the word out, we have signs such as the sign in the top left at almost every boat ramp in the state, either asking people not to stock Alabama bass in the first place, or a different sign explains that when they're present, why they need to harvest them, and it encourages them to harvest. We've also tried to reach out to our constituents through every venue possible, social media, newspaper, television, radio, to get the word out about the importance of this problem and what they can do to help. Okay, so on a brighter note, let's talk about some of the positives. So some of the positives we have with black bass in North Carolina are our populations and our coastal rivers. Despite having all the building blocks to produce really outstanding bass fisheries, these systems have historically not been able to meet their potential because they experience frequent fish kills following hurricanes. Luckily, we're now at a point where it's been 15 years since we've had a major fish kill from a hurricane, and these populations have finally had a chance to reach their potential and show us what they can do. And what they can do is grow some gigantic largemouth bass. We also still have some really great largemouth bass populations in our Piedmont lakes that have not yet been impacted by Alabama bass. But don't just take my word for it. Here's some accolades that our fisheries have received from national fishing organizations in recent years, ranking our lakes and sounds among the best bass fisheries in the Southeast and the entire country. And they're not just talking about it and writing about it. They're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're bringing national level tournaments to North Carolina to take advantage of these great bass fisheries. In just the past few years, we've had multiple tournament circuits, national level televised tournament circuits, visiting our Piedmont lakes and our coastal rivers, where they have had outstanding catches and shown the whole country how great these fisheries are. And in the process, they brought a lot of positive exposure and tourism and economic benefits to the communities that have hosted these tournaments. Another thing to be excited about is we just completed an opinion survey of our state's bass anglers in 2025. That survey showed that bass were the most popular sport fish in the state, with 65% of anglers being bass fishermen. That translated to a number greater than 700,000 bass anglers in North Carolina, which is the highest number on record by a wide margin compared to any of our previous angler opinion surveys. And those 700,000 anglers spent a lot of money fishing for bass, with a total economic contribution of $2.5 billion with a B dollars to North Carolina's economy. Despite the fact there's a lot of people out there fishing for them, most people are still having good experiences, and over half of our anglers said they were still somewhat or very satisfied with their bass fishing experience. So we're now taking that information from the angler opinion survey with everything we learned from our anglers, and we're using it to update our state's black bass management plan. Our original management plan that guides our Principles and Strategies for Managing Black Bass was initially crafted in 1993. We completed a midterm update in 2012. And thanks to the hard work and vision and wisdom of our predecessors, our original plan has served us very well and goes a long ways towards explaining why our fisheries are in such good shape today. However, there's been a lot of water under the bridge since the original plan, and a lot of things have changed. And we now need to update that plan to reflect those changes. So we're beginning that process now, and we're hopeful that when this new plan is complete, it'll serve us as well moving forward as our original plan has to get us up to this point today. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions anybody might have. Yes, sir.
We didn't, where they were. Did the first Alabama bass appear in the United States?
Well, they're native to the southwest of us. So the Mobile drainage, basically Alabama, that Georgia, a little bit of Georgia, eastern Mississippi, they're native. They've always been there. But the first ones in North Carolina got put into Lake Chattooga on the North Carolina-Georgia border back in the 80s, where they kind of stayed put for a long time and didn't spread. And then sometime around 2000, they got put into Lake Norman. And from there, they spread in Lake Norman, and then the anglers just branched out from Lake Norman and began spreading them across the state.
Of the states where they're native, are they the predominant black bass species in those states?
It depends. It depends on the systems. If it's a more nutrient-rich, productive system that's more fertile, they make up a smaller portion of the population than largemouth bass. But in other systems where the water is more sterile and clear, the Alabama bass are more common.
Do they thrive? The first question is, the smallmouth bass are predominantly found in out-of-state and colder water. Is that the key to their survival?
It's partly cold and partly smallmouth bass like clear water, and they like rocky habitat, which happens to be more common in the western part of the state. So it's part temperature, part physical habitat.
So do the Alabama bass thrive equally as well in the western habitat as they do in the coastal habitat?
Yes, yes. The Alabama bass in general tend to prefer more clear waters.
Do we have the Lake Mount Mesquite?
No, not that we know of. Yes, sir.
Asking a question. What would possess anglers to go to the trouble of actually catching a Alabama bass and then taking the time to go drive to another lake or reservoir and releasing it?
That's a great question, and that really gets to the heart of all this. You know, our populations are in great shape, or they were historically, but bass are still hard to catch. They're smart, they're finicky, and there's a lot of days you go fishing and don't catch anything. So Alabama bass are much more aggressive. They're easier to catch, they bite better. So anglers thought if we bring these in, they'll perk up the fishing and give us some more action. And then in the early years, you know, they weren't seeing the negative consequences of having the Alabama bass. Because the first few years they're there, you know, their population's growing, people are catching them left and right, but they haven't really had time to start reducing the largemouth or the smallmouth bass numbers yet. So people think, oh, this was a great idea. Let's put another load in the live well and drive up the chain and put them in the next lake upstream and start another population. So basically they did all this expansion before they had enough time for the early ones to show people what was actually going to ultimately come. My joke is it was kind of like getting married after only a single day. You don't really know what you're getting into.
Did we ever find out who any of these folks?
No, and I'm sure it was multiple people. But it doesn't take, you know, even though this angler opinion survey that we just finished, only 2% of anglers said they preferred fishing for Alabama or spotted bass. They are in the gross minority statewide. But all it takes is 1 or 2 boats with a live well full of these things to pull up to a ramp. And it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. It only takes 1 or 2 misguided individuals and they can ruin everything.
Chattooga is about half of its services in Georgia. We kind of joint manage that with Georgia's DNR. And a lot of those Georgia fisheries clubs, go over to Gunnersville and fish that Alabama circuit and stuff, so it's not hard for me to see how they got to Chateau. But it took, certainly deliberate action, to get there to San Diego and Hiawassee to Norman, but that's.
So you do believe that they know exactly what they're catching and doing it in a deliberate?
I don't know now. I think initially, absolutely, right? So same with blueback heron and things like that. I mean, I don't think it was a malicious thing that people did. I think it was just sort of uninformed biology that was guys thinking they're helping doing something, but there was unintended consequences that they weren't educated or enough to see. For sure.
So they are fun to catch. The F1 with the smallmouth and Alabama bass, is that typically a lot of the fish, that smallmouth?
A lot of times, yes, they can. That first generation, when Alabama bass first get introduced, you will see some trophy hybrid fish show up where you're getting, genetically pure Alabamas crossing with genetically pure largemouth or smallmouth, and their offspring are sort of like an F1. So it was very common in Western North Carolina when Alabama bass first started getting into lakes. People were catching what they tried to claim were state record spotted bass. I did probably half a dozen of those investigations myself where we had to go certify it. And in every case, they were actually a 50-50 cross between a largemouth and an Alabama. So that over time, as they get more common, you don't see as many of those pure F1 hybrids and they sort of go away.
In Fontana, 75% of the smallmouth hybrids.
Yep.
They'll have that too.
Yep. And over time, they'll come to look more and more like an Alabama bass and less like a smallmouth. But some of them, our biologists in Lake James who have handled more smallmouth than anybody, they were misidentifying them. Like these early genetic studies, that example I showed, they thought that all the fish they were testing were actually pure smallmouth bass. That those first generations can be really tough to tell.
But in the typical lifespan of a largemouth and Alabama bass, Alabama bass don't grow as fast or as large.
They do not. They can grow pretty quickly, the Alabama bass, but they do tend to have a shorter lifespan. So they grow quickly while they're young, but then they don't often live long enough to get really big. That kind of separates them from the large.
About what size do they max out?
Max out can be, they can actually reach, you get the rare one that can be 5 or 6 pounds, like your absolute trophy, whereas for a largemouth, that might be 9 or 10 pounds. But on average, they're going to be much smaller. Depends on the lake, but a pound is usually a pretty average size Alabama bass. But you'll have some lakes they're not all small. You'll have some that might reach 2 or 3 pounds and be a decent size, but on average, people are going to be catching high numbers of smaller fish.
One quick question, slightly off topic, but you mentioned Mattamuskeet and water quality. What's the status of the carp removal at Mattamuskeet? Is it still ongoing, Kevin?
Yes, sir. It's wrapping up. The company that went out, they found some, but not to the near numbers that they were. So there is some opportunity to say that the cutting them out and the work that had been done for integrated pest management has helped. However, the water quality is still relatively poor.
Not enough to bring the aquatic vegetation back.
Right. Well, I mean, it's still early to tell what that level has done, but the number of carp in the lake has been deemed much smaller than 2018. In 2018, it was 4 million pounds estimated, and the recent 2025 is like 400,000 pounds. So it has fallen quite a bit. So that helps bring the vegetation back. They're still monitoring that and seeing.
Vegetation doesn't come back out of the carp removal. What's the next?
The turbidity of Lake Mattamuskeet is kind of a double-edged sword, where again, that wind fetch that keeps blowing back and forth can kind of keep that turbidity high. So the plants can't really establish. If we can get a time where some plants start getting established and then build back, as we saw in 2004 and 5, when the vegetation was at its peak, that's really what we're hoping to see.
Thank you.
So in Mattamuskeet, the largemouth bass population in the last 10 years has improved, remained stable, or declined.
That's a great question. What we've seen is that they've adapted. I did a movement study from 2017 to 2019. While they didn't necessarily have the available habitat for vegetation, they were using the canals, they were utilizing the lake. Our fisheries biologists have sampled there and found it relatively stable, and that population is kind of adapted to that. There's white perch, there's great white perch fisheries there, so forage base must be good. But yes, the water quality is still a challenge.
That was great, great presentation. I want to thank you, Mr. Hodges and Mr. Doppendorf.
Thank you.
Always interesting to have an agency spotlight. I really enjoyed that one. I'd like to move on now to land acquisitions and property matters. I'd like to call in Darren Barnes, Land and Water Access Chief, Division Chief, for that.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. So today I will cover our land acquisition and property matters, which includes two phase twos as well, acquisitions and another property matter. And we'll take them, the phase twos together. So I'll bring your attention to exhibit D1, which is the Stones Morse Tract, totaling 800 acres in Transylvania County. And D2, exhibit D2, which is the Rose Creek, the Rose Creek water line, totaling 2 acres in Mitchell County. Staff and the Land Acquisition and Property Committee recommend approval of exhibits D1 and D2.
Your motion? So moved. Second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, we'll move on to our other property matter. And this would be exhibit E, which is the Juniper Creek Game Land Easement Request in Brunswick County. Staff and Land Acquisition Property Committee recommend approval of exhibit E as amended yesterday in our Land and Acquisition Property Committee, which was to allow one household.
Okay, motion.
What, if we call it a household or a single family dwelling, there's some words, there's some language there that needs to be right.
Yeah, single family dwellers. That's what we call it. Yes, sir.
Any comment? Any other
No,
discussion?
no, that's just want to nail it down.
Or any other discussion? That was the second. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. I'd like to now go to water safety rulemaking. Ms. Betsy Haywood, Water Safety Rulemaking Coordinator.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Good morning, everybody. You'll recall that yesterday during the meeting of the Committee of the Whole, we reviewed and discussed 7 proposals for no-wake zones in the various counties and municipalities. With your permission, I would like to first take 5 of those that are recommended for adoption and then separately consider the proposed temporary rulemaking in New Hanover County and proposed repeal of the rule in Nags Head. Thank you. First, in Exhibit F2, 15A NCAC 10F.0301 General Provisions, there are amendments to resolve ambiguities in text and clarify definitions for designated agencies and implementation of placement of regulatory markers. Next, in Exhibit G2, 10F.0303 Beaufort County, several amendments. One, to reduce the size of the no-wake zone at Broad Creek in the city of Washington, remove the no-wake zone at Catalina Creek in Bellhaven, remove the no-wake zone on Tranters Creek, remove the no-wake zone at Little Creek in Chocowinity, and incorporate into the NCAC the boating access areas in Beaufort County and to designate responsibility for implementation of placement of regulatory markers to the various agencies. Next, in Exhibit H2, 10F.0310 Dare County, amendments to incorporate into the NCAC the Stumpy Point boating access area and designate responsibility for implementation of markers to various agencies in Dare County. Exhibit I2, 10F.0329 Rowan County, amendments to remove the no-wake zone on High Rock Lake on Second Creek in Salisbury, to incorporate boating access areas into the NCAC in Rowan County, and to designate responsibility for implementation of the placement of regulatory markers. And finally, Exhibit J2, 10F.0354. This is Pitt County, amendments to remove the no-wake zone on Tranters Creek in the Pitt County portion The other, as you know, was in the Beaufort County portion, and also to incorporate voting access areas into the North Carolina Administrative Code and designate responsibility for placement of markers to the various agencies. Staff recommends adoption of F2, G2, H2, I2, and J2.
Say what, I'd like to ask for a motion and a second for exhibits F2, G2, H2, I2, and J2.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you. Next in Exhibit K2, this is consideration of 15A NCAC 10F.0314, New Hanover County temporary rulemaking. This was done concurrently with emergency rulemaking that is already in effect. This is in the area of the Cape Fear River in Wilmington, 160 yards southwest of the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. Because the North Carolina DOT drilling project will be completed prior to March 11th, 2026, which is the expiration of the emergency rule that is already in place. So staff recommends that you do not adopt this temporary rule.
Thank you. So when we have to make a motion to not adopt the rule. We do, okay. In an abundance of caution, I'll recuse myself to avoid appearance conflict. However, I will ask for a motion second to deny. Second. Any discussion? I'll recuse myself from this. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you. And then finally, in Exhibit L2, this is 15A NCAC 10F.0368, the town of Nags Head. Currently, there is only one no-wake zone in the town of Nags Head. This is the no-wake zone at the Old Nags Head Cove subdivision within 200 yards of the shoreline of that subdivision. While this no-wake zone has been in effect since 2002, it was never marked. Staff found that it is not necessary because there's no activity basically in that area of the shoreline around that subdivision. So staff recommends repeal of this rule.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Is there a motion and a second? To repeal? Motion. Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, moving on with rulemaking, would like to call on Corey Oakley, Inland Fifth Street Division Chief, to present several rulemaking.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chairman. Again, if it pleases you, we would like to take M1, N1, and O1 together. Okay. As we mentioned yesterday in the committee of the whole, we have three temporary rules for adoption. The first was mandatory harvest reporting requirements along the coast, just a cleanup of that rule. And then the second rule is opening a season on the Neuse and Tar Rivers for striped bass, April 1st to April 30th. And the third is bluefish, changing the creel limit from 3 fish to 5 fish. And Vice Chairman, staff recommend adoption of all three rules.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve? Nice. So it's M2, M2, and O2. Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Same. Thank you. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion.
Opposed.
Opposed. One. That motion passes.
All right, and our next exhibit P is to notice text for Sheep's Head. This would be a temporary rule. The temp rule would be to change the daily creel limit from 10 to 5 fish and the minimum size limit from 10 to 14 inches for Sheep's Head. And staff recommend approval of that, please.
Thank you, sir. Motion to approve exhibit P.
So moved.
Second, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Would like to thank you, sir. We now call on Joe Solo, policy analyst, analyst.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Good morning, everyone. As discussed yesterday in the committee of the whole, we have begun our second iteration of the periodic rules review process. Staff have reviewed and classified all rules as necessary. Staff recommend approval of the initial determinations in Exhibit Q and an opening to that 60-day comment period.
So is there any motion to approve exhibit Q?
So move.
Motion, is there a second? Second, thank you. Any discussion on exhibit Q? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Moving on, thank you again. Let me fill in for Chairman Craig this meeting. Thank all the commissioners for being here, for your input, interest, ayes and nays. So we thank staff as always for being the engine, the machine that runs here. That concludes my comments.
Yes, sir. And first of all, I wanted to congratulate all the participants in last week's National Archery in the Schools Program State Tournament, and especially to the winning team, Startown Elementary School, Hudson Middle School, and East Burke High School. As a reminder, the Youth Higher Education Skills Tournaments begin next month and will culminate with the state tournament on April 25th. Also, want to thank staff for all the hard work they do on behalf of Resource, and congratulate Doug Betzler on his promotion to chief of our new lien restoration division. We look forward to the great work that he's going to do. And lastly, but certainly not least, I want to thank all the commissioners for all that they do, all the phone calls, the emails, the texts that they're answering, and certainly for all your support and guidance.
Thank you. Any other comments from any commissioners? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had on my list to mention the Hunter Ed, but he kind of beat me to it. But if you've never been to one of those events, you need to try it out because there's something. The District 5 is scheduled for March 7th. And I think last year we had roughly 1,500 people, parents and kids. And it is a killer event. So if you can go to yours or go to one, y'all gotta check it out. Thank you.
Any other comments from any commissioners? Meeting is adjourned.